guys, I'm really scared that what we've all been fearing or reporting about is becoming a reality in southern Italy in the greater Naples area at Campi Flegrei, a potential supervolcano. And it has been rumbling, it has been showing unusual signs of activity. And we just had on May 20th the biggest earthquake that this region has seen in 40 years, a 4.4 magnitude earthquake, and 3 more above the magnitude 3 for volcanic earthquakes. That is quite large, and it has done more damage to structures and home than we initially thought. And the weird thing is, there was an earthquake swarm like this, or a period of bradyseism where the land underneath that volcano is rising because of magmatic fluids rising up, hot steam rising up, or magma rising up. And now the chances that it's magma is increasing because a new groundbreaking study, watch my video about this, has confirmed a magma chamber at a shallow depth of only 4 to 5 kilometers. So is magma rising? Is this causing these earthquakes? They're making an unusual sound. They're more horizontally moving. In the 80s, homes haven't been damaged like this, but all of a sudden they are now. And in this video, we will hear from a guy who knows what he's talking about, because he's at the source, at the Italian Institute of Volcanology and Seismology, the INGV, connected with the Vesuvius Observatory. And that guy basically really scares me a lot, because what he says basically tells us we have to assume that there could be an eruption soon. More of this in this video, but let's start with what just happened. There was another large earthquake for volcanic activity. So another earthquake swarm after the big one that we just had. It was 2.7. And this shock was during the night in Italy, Friday night. And it shook the Solfatara area again. The Solfatara is the area that you see behind me. That is the caldera. That is the heart of Campi Flegrei that stretches about 100 kilometers, even into the Gulf of POzzuoli. So it's a large, widespread area, not a typical crater like the neighbor Vesuvius, which is very, very dangerous as well, by the way. But Campi Flegrei is way more dangerous, and people were not aware of this until maybe at least the early 2000s. I just reported about this in my last video. One guy on television, he said about the large earthquakes on May 20th, well, it was shaking and it's Vesuvius waking up or something. It's not Vesuvius, it's Campi Flegrei, guys. What has this 2.7 earthquake done? There were homes declared uninhabitable, and people were basically locked out by authorities out of their homes. The civil defense has red taped those homes. People were very upset about this because they didn't have time when they left their homes. The earthquakes were shaking, like these 4 big earthquakes in a matter of a few minutes. People were running out on the streets because they were afraid that their homes might collapse. They didn't have a bag-out bag. They didn't pack anything. So now they can't get back into their homes to gather the basic necessities. So people are upset. But now the number of homes that have officially been declared uninhabitable have all doubled. And also the number of displaced people that can't go back there has doubled in just a few hours because of this new earthquake swarm. This earthquake swarm was definitely felt in POzzuoli, in Baccioli, and in Quarto. And we know after the big one on May 20th, the authorities said, well, you have to be prepared that there could be an even bigger one. So authorities are trying to put people in hotels nearby, develop plans that people can go back to their homes to collect their belongings that they need. But as of now, the reports are that 83 families have been evicted from their homes and 58 buildings have been declared unusable. There are currently over 1,200 requests for checks for a possible damage of homes so that they're not habitable anymore. There's large cracks and there's subsidence, and the fire brigade, the municipalities, and the civil protection is out there trying to take care of these requests. And you've seen the video in my last videos when the people run towards the civil defense vehicle. They are so angry at the civil defense because they're saying for hours after the quakes, the people were out there standing in the streets and nobody did show up. No civil defense vehicle showed up giving them instructions of what to do. Would it be safe to go back in their homes? Should they wait? So that's why when finally one poor guy, it's not his fault, showed up in the vehicle, all the tension, all the emotions, all the fear released in these people, and that's why they were banging on the door and trying to get the guy and get something out of him. I don't think they have hurt him. There's no reports. So please, cut the residents some slack. It's a scary situation, and they're Italian, right? So they want what's going on, right? Why are they not helping us? They feel left alone. But guys, now we have to talk about something, what this scientist said, and it gives me shivers down my spine. Really, I have to say that. This is not fear-mongering. I'm just telling you what he said in an interview. And we know another guy who also works with this guy and has observed Campi Flegrei for over 40 years and for decades, worked at the University of Rome, Vesuvius Observatory, INGV. He said last week, before that current problem started, if I had the resources, I would evacuate right now. That's how dangerous he thinks that area has become recently with that land rise that has accelerated recently and these earthquake swarms. But he said that before the 4.4 even appeared. And now let's hear the other guy and then let me know what you think. It scares me big time, guys. He is a volcanologist, Giuseppe Mastrolorenzo, and he says, quote, "It's very dangerous to hope that the phenomenon will calm down. Unfortunately, we have to think of the worst. Many colleagues think that we could even get earthquakes of magnitude 5. And this is only the beginning of what he says, guys. He says the worst case scenario is unpredictable, and the worst case scenario with Campi Flegrei is a supervolcanic eruption that will not only affect Italy and whole Europe, it can affect the whole world because it can create a little ice age by blocking out the sun from widespread. So nothing is growing, you don't have any food, the temperature is cooling down. There are scientists that are saying the Earth has 74 days of food supply left. 74 days. And I'm not only talking about Italy. Check out my video about this. This is how the thumbnail looks. Check it out in my playlist. I think you should know about this. Not only if you live in Europe. Let's remember when the volcano in Iceland erupted. It wasn't even a super big eruption, but it was blowing a lot of ashes into the air. The international flight traffic was quite interrupted also between North America and Europe. So that was already having quite an impact. So let's not forget that. So what is he saying? And this is really scaring me because we've talked about evacuation of that area. There's not much evacuation time. If the earthquake swarm comes, and it is the earthquake swarm that causes an eruption, that comes before the eruption, when magma's on the move, grinding its way to the surface, it comes with earthquakes. Then there's little to no warning, maybe a few hours, but that's not enough to evacuate more than 3 million people in an area that has old buildings that will collapse and block the roads. Narrow streets, no big evacuation roads, and they have no plan in place. They know it's not working. That's why over the recent month, the reports were that residents, especially of POzzuoli, that is basically on top of the epicenter, are taking more and more anxiety medication. Not because they're fearing the volcano, but they're fearing the evacuation. This is dire. And this scientist says, I have urgently requested a modification of the current emergency plan because it doesn't work. And they're coming up with this now? I want to show you something. In 2019, they have rehearsed a potential evacuation. You see this here in the video, like people guiding people to trains and then trying to drive them away. And we'll talk more about this in this video, but look at this simulation that the INGV, the Italian Institute for Geology and Volcanology, has created about a potential Campi Flegrei eruption. And this scientist here works for them. And look at this, how it spreads, how this eruption, it comes up very, very high, and then it spreads very, very quickly and widely over this area, over this densely populated area. People are basically living on top of the volcano, around the solfatara, around the craters. And that's why this is so dangerous. He says, the Campi Flegrei, the Phlegraean fields in English, are recognized as one of the most dangerous areas in the world. We need a truly effective emergency plan. I have urgently requested the modification of the current one, which in my opinion does not work. The port of POzzuoli must be dredged, as it could be a very important escape route. And we know the land has risen under the port of POzzuoli and making it more shallow. So boats run on ground. It's been a big problem recently. But he's forgetting one thing. I don't think he's forgetting, but Campi Flegrei stretches into the Gulf of POzzuoli, into the water. And there have been earthquakes in the water. And scientists from New Zealand that also know what they're doing, because New Zealand is a high active area with volcanoes and earthquakes. They have made a simulation where they say, should the eruption of Campi Flegrei happen in the Gulf of POzzuoli, in the sea, it could send 100 feet high, 30-meter tsunami wave towards the coast of Naples. And that wave will be there quickly, in addition to the problem of this volcanic eruption. So if you have boats in the harbor of POzzuoli, that won't help you much at all. So he thinks the port could be a very important escape route. And he says, quote, I emphasize that science cannot predict the worst in this area. They don't know when, what, and how. I have been saying this for years, he says. He's a volcanologist with the INGV. He's observing this area day and night, basically. That's his only job, so to speak. He has conducted an inspection of the port area of POzzuoli, and right now, for the residents that have been displaced, there are also emergency tents that they have set up there for the residents to find a point of collection where they go and can get some water and some information or whatever. They can spend the nights in these tents. So he says, I have always said that the Campi Flegrei area is recognized as one of the highest risk areas in the world. We need to be concerned and always be prepared for a possible escalation, meaning eruption, both in terms of the seismic risk, as we've seen in the last few days, he says, but also don't forget the volcanic risk. He's speaking it out in the open. And he says, therefore, I insist on the necessity of an effective emergency plan that addresses the criticalities of these areas, especially this area. And what are the critical points? The critical points is we have more than 3 million people. We have a problem that we do not have escape routes like wide 6-lane highways, straight lanes. We have ancient buildings there, narrow towns, old buildings that will collapse and clog everything. And history has shown us in World War II, but even we could see it when the Russians started to get close to the capital of Ukraine, Kiev. People were trying to leave the city, and at that point they weren't even too concerned. They didn't think that it would escalate that badly and that they were really in danger from bombs falling on their heads. So they were quite moderately, with not super panic, driving out there, and the streets were clogged. And that's what historians say. In Germany, when people were fleeing the streets, the highways then were clogged, cars were standing, people were going left and right of the highways on foot. So that's not an option with a volcanic eruption here. So he says, from a scientific standpoint, based on my studies of magma ascent speed and the causes of the current bradyseism, the land rise, you see it in this graphic here, the land is rising. And then we have that shield rock that shields this magma chamber that is confirmed by this new study at a depth of only 4 to 5 kilometers. They're shielding this magma chamber, but by these constant, like land rises, land subsiding, land rises, magmatic fluids, like creeping into these stones and rocks, they're getting brittle, they're getting weakened, making it much easier, guys, for the magma to potentially reach the surface and cause an eruption there. He says, we must recognize that these systems are inherently unpredictable because they are chaotic systems. So what he's urging people is not to put their head in the sand and say, wow, that's not going to happen. That'll never happen. Well, that said the people maybe of that big earthquake in Turkey, or the people that were facing that tsunami in Asia, right? We always think it's not going to happen, but eventually it could happen, and it probably will happen. And the question is, when will it happen? Will it happen soon? Are these earthquakes the sign that something's going on? It is getting scary, I have to tell you this. And that's what he is saying. You can hear it. He's saying it out loud, but you can also read it in between the lines. Of course, they're trying not to create panic, because if more than 3 million people that are hot-headed like the Italians are getting in panic and in rage, and then they're trying to flee, that is also can end up with lots of fatalities, right? And if then there is no eruption, it's also not good. I tell you honestly, it's I really have to say the word, a very shitty situation. And I've been thinking the last few days, day and night, what would I do if I was the mayor of Naples, and what would my decision be? I mean, ideally, find another piece of land somewhere else and settle everyone there if you have unlimited resources of money, but that's not the case, right? So what do you do? What do you do? That's really, really scary. And, to say, yeah, let's evacuate the people in the red zones. If Campi Flegrei erupts big, it's going to be everywhere, right? It doesn't help you if you evacuate the red zone of Campi Flegrei. Whole Naples, southern Italy, and Europe will have a huge, huge problem. And listen to this. I have to tell you this again. He says, the system is inherently unpredictable because they are a chaotic system. And now it comes, he says, hence we cannot guarantee safety. We cannot guarantee safety. He's very, very worried, guys. I don't know how you feel, but I feel like this definitely as well. And it continues. He says, the solution is to have a prevention strategy, which for an area like this includes adequate escape routes, both by land and sea, especially because the caldera is divided by the coast. Thus, there are several ports along the coast, with POzzuoli being one of the most important. if there is no eruption that starts in the water, because if your plan is based 50-50 on water evacuation through the ports and land evacuation, you have a big problem, because if it's erupt in the water, you can only go in one direction, and that is inland. So his solution is, because the port of POzzuoli is so important, that they quickly have to dredge that port to ensure that it can operate as a fundamental escape route. And then he further says, information dissemination to the population and fundamental drills must also consider the possibility that we may not be able to predict the escalation of events. It could come suddenly, but guys, we have to be honest here. If there's a sudden eruption without warning, it's going to be catastrophic. I give you an example. The authorities are saying Vesuvius, the red zone about Vesuvius, the people that are settling around that crater there, roughly 700,000 people. If Vesuvius erupts, I'm just saying it, it will not end well for all of them. That's what they're saying. And we know what Vesuvius has done in the past. The eruption happened so quickly. You see these stone creatures, statues that look like as Medusa had looked at them and cast them to stone. As this eruption happened so quickly, this is what happened to the people that were around Vesuvius. So this is a very disturbing situation in Italy right now. For me, it somehow feels making evacuation plans, talking about improving the evacuation plans. In the back of their heads, they must think, gosh, do we do this to give the residents a better feeling of potential safety, to give them a feeling that they can do something, that they have a plan in place so that they can go on with their daily lives without being completely in panic and fear for their lives? But they must know that in reality, not many of them will make it. That's my opinion. And again, I don't want to do fear-mongering, but we have to look at these things in realistic ways. It's way too densely populated. So he further says, as acknowledged by the Major Risk Commission, the escalation of events can catch us in the midst of an eruption without any strategy. And also interpret these words right. He says we have to get a better strategy. And then he says, we don't have a strategy right now. And that's why he said the eruption can catch up with us. So basically he's saying it could erupt right now. That's how I interpret this. So that's why he's urging them, hurry up, get prepared. So he says, thus, an emergency plan must be ready regardless of scientific knowledge or any hypothetical predictions, which may not correspond to the actual evolution of events. But, better be safe than sorry. Better be prepared than not. So he says, monitoring can only tell us what has happened up to the last second. So they need something to happen in order to monitor it, but they can't predict the future. He says, these predictions provide no information about what will happen in the second after. And that's why this is so dangerous. He says, for years, I have criticized, based on my scientific research, the inadequacy of the current plan, which considers only a moderate scenario, a medium-small eruption. So listen, guys, he wants a scenario for the big one, for the supervolcanic eruption. And if at the Vesuvius Observatory and at the INGV. If all these guys were thinking that this is completely impossible, why are they making so much pressure right now? Why did his colleagues say, even before the current earthquake swarm started, I would evacuate right now because that is the only solution to save these lives? And this sounds crazy, but evacuate more than 3 million people and put them somewhere else. I'm sorry to say so. That's the only safe solution. And he says, and that's why the Campi Flegrei are so dangerous and considered one of the most dangerous areas. He says, for the Campi Flegrei, even a slightly larger eruption would put the entire metropolitan area of Naples at risk, not just the approximately 500,000 people that basically live inside and on that caldera and some eastern neighborhoods of Naples and other municipalities. He says the plan is totally based on the presumed capacity of monitoring to predict the escalation towards an eruption, but this has never been demonstrated. So he says, I have recently documented this to the president of INGV, and I have requested an urgent radical modification of the emergency plan based on now universally recognized scientific evidence. Unfortunately, in recent decades, effective prediction has only been achieved in about 20% of the cases. And we've seen this in Iceland, right? It comes with a surprise, especially the January eruption there that was happening at the doorsteps of Grindavik, and then a surprise second eruption occurred, burning down 3 homes. So 20% prediction rate. So he says that his colleague says, evacuate now. And guys, this video has really become long. I'll release a second part very, very soon with crucial information about what they have done so far with their evacuation plans and how ridiculous they might look or might seem to you if you compare them with the threat. It's like David against Goliath, so to speak, right? Lots of more information that I have gathered that I want to send out to you. That's why I urge you, if you haven't yet, please subscribe. I would love to welcome you on my channel and see you on a regular basis. And to my regular subscribers, thanks again for watching. I see you in the comments. Yeah, I see you in the comments. We see you in the comments. I had really a scary moment. I was talking, recording this video, and then all of a sudden my camera said, no more storage available. So ending this video, and I'm like, oh no, I didn't talk for 30 minutes for nothing and it hasn't stored it, so no more storage available. But so thankfully it did store almost everything, just not the end part. So that's why I'm doing this here. Thanks guys for your support. It's scary times worldwide. I just released a video about White Island. Remember, the ones that are watching my Iceland videos, we're talking about White Island quite a bit, so check out that video. And guys, let's stay tuned with Naples. I'll release another one shortly. Check out the ones here in the end screen. It's valuable information for you to know what's going on. Thank you for watching, guys. My heart goes out to everyone in the affected areas in Italy. Please stay safe. Get to safety, be considerate with the situation, and inform yourself continuously on a like a second base, I would say, right now. Thanks guys. Bye bye.